Hi everyone, if you're watching this, you are on our This Valorant Life channel page, and we want to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about our TVL Tent, which is our This Valorant Life community. And I'm going to throw it over to Adam in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish with this community.
So this community is mainly a place for people like you guys that are trying to improve at the game to have people around you that are similar. I know when I was trying to improve at this game, it felt pretty lonely, and you really don't have like a space to, I guess, differentiate yourself from the general Valorant community. And the general Valorant community, I think, you know, has a lot of different parts of the game that we don't really enjoy. There's a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of cope. There's a lot of encouraging bad habits and not really just, playing the game how we think it deserves to be played. And our community is about respecting the game, respecting yourself, and respecting others. So if you think that sounds good, then I think you'll be a good fit for the community.
And the community is a paid community, but we are not doing this to enrich ourselves. So what we're going to be doing is that the paid community is $5 USD per month. And that goes through Ko-Fi or Coffee. I'm not sure which one it is. There's a link in the channel description, and there'll be a link below as well. We're gonna pool all those funds together, and when it reaches $800, we're gonna actually create kind of a scholarship where we're gonna have people apply, and the community is gonna help us select who will win the scholarship and get to work with Adam through one of his coaching programs. And so that's one way we think we can take what this community is doing for good, give it to someone who may not otherwise be able to afford it, and is really intentional and excited about it. And so if this sounds like something you'd be excited about, we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can join us, ko-fi.com/thisvalorantlife. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to This Valorant Life, episode 44. In this episode, in preparation for 2025, the 2025 ranked episode, we're going to be doing a 2025 ranked review. Just touching on a lot of the concepts we've covered in the past, especially for newer viewers, and how you should be thinking about preparing for this new year so you can go crush your games and get that dream rank that you've been hoping for. And so with that, I'm going to throw it over to Adam. We want to revisit and start with process. And there's going to be lots of pieces to this, but Adam, when we talk about process, what are you thinking about?
The first thing that comes to mind is having an actual system. So when you approach your ranked games, it can kind of just be, oh, you just play your ranked games. And that's how it was for a long time. But once I kind of actually nailed down what my process would look like to improving, everything became easier. So generally, the structure of a process might look like you have your warm-up, then you have your ranked games, and then after your ranked games, you have a review process, which can either be conjoined or slightly separated, but that's really the main core three is warm-up, ranked games, and then review. There's a lot of stuff you can add to it, like you can have separate mechanical training, you could have VOD review sessions, because reviewing might mean you review your games, and then VOD review might mean you're learning on other people's playbooks, but generally that's the structure.
And so, one piece of process is we have a concept, and we borrowed this from Broken by Concept, which is this idea of playing with intensity. So maybe Adam, walk us through why we think playing with intensity is super important.
The number one thing is to avoid bad habits and autopiloting kind of building up. So there's this saying that no matter what you're doing, you're practicing. Mm-hmm. So you're always practicing something. I think that's the actual saying. So even if you're just playing your ranked games, you might be practicing bad habits. So if you play with intensity, you can kind of break out of that. And a lot of times with people that I work with, or even myself included, when I'm playing the game, I tend to make a lot of errors and mistakes because of either tilt, low energy, maybe I'm just trying to reclaim points, like I'm revenge queuing. Mm-hmm. And you can avoid a lot of this stuff, or at least be aware of a lot of this stuff when you play with intensity. And to be a little bit more clear on what intensity means, it means that you're trying to be present, but you're also trying to put effort in. And that sometimes isn't easy to do. Mm-hmm. So intensity is really important to actually make progress. Like deliberate practice is what allows you to make progress, and intensity is, I guess, a requirement to have deliberate practice.
And really, this is because if you're listening to this podcast and you care about this 2025 ranked episode, we would assume that means you want to improve. And
Mm-hmm.
there's sometimes this concept, it's called dissonance, which is when our actions don't align with what we want, right? And so if you want to improve, if you deeply want to improve, and yet you play 8 ranked games a day and it's super unfocused and you're not focusing, you're not playing with intensity, well, there's dissonance there. You're not doing it in a way that you can improve. It's more akin to watching Netflix than trying to improve that point. At that point, if you're playing too much and you can't do it with intensity, you're hoping to almost improve by osmosis, like just by being next to something. And that is not going to be replicable or a practical strategy if you really want to get better at things.
And I guess a quick thing I want to jump in on is it is possible to improve without the intensity piece. I don't know if it's genetic factors or if it's just repetition. It's probably a factor of both. But there are players, and you guys might know some, that literally only play the game. They don't warm up, they don't review, and they make progress. And if that's you, then it doesn't have to. You don't have to take this approach. But if you feel like you want to take your gaming a little bit more seriously, playing with intensity can be a game changer. And I've worked with plenty of people that thought that it was possible to do it the other way. Then they hit a plateau, and then I can see in their gameplay that they're making very common mistakes that even they know is wrong. And just getting them to play with intensity is a game changer. So yeah, that's the main point.
I think it's important to realize that everyone is on a spectrum in every part of their lives, right? There are people that are more athletic. There are people that remember things better. There are people that are better at taking tests, right? And if you're going to hope to improve and you're going to do it without much structure, you're basically just hoping that you are the LeBron James of Valorant, that you are somehow him. You are Primi. And the reality is, if you were him, you would already know it. Like you wouldn't be discovering it now. Like you would just naturally rank up. So I think if you are in that space, all power to you. But I think for most of us mortals, like that's not going to be a good roadmap for improvement.
Right.
So playing with intensity, and so because we want to play with intensity, that's where again we've adopted this from a book by concept, this idea of rank blocks, right? So maybe walk the audience through what do you think like a rank blocked? How would we define that, Adam?
It's like a 2 to 3 hour, maybe 4 hour time window where you're playing Valorant, where you're playing to improve. So this would be 15 to 30 minutes of warm up. Your warm up is pretty much largely individualized. Some people prefer doing in-game stuff. Some people prefer doing aim trainer stuff. You can even do meditation as part of your warm-up. Mm-hmm. Whatever the case may be, you're getting yourself into the game and ready to play your games. Then you have your ranked games. I guess I should quickly say your warm-up isn't meant to be training. So some people kind of like to do aim training for like an hour before they play to get them warmed up. The reason why it's not meant for training is because you don't want to fatigue yourself before you get into the game. It's kind of like hitting the gym and then going to play a match in your sport. Doesn't really make the most sense. So warm up, get ready for the game, prepare, and then when you're in the game, you want to play with high intensity. And because you're playing with a high intensity, that typically means you're going to be limited on the amount of games you can play at a high intensity. This is going to vary from individual to individual. For me personally, around game 3, I start to feel not as involved as I was game 1, whether that be due to tilt or energy levels or both. But around game 3, I think it's good to take a break and to call it. Some people can push game 5. Maybe some people can push even more games. But generally, we recommend 3 to 5 games in a rank block as your starting point.
One important thing I want to bring up is that we know that when you get distracted from something, it takes a while to come back to it. And so if you're going to be playing with intensity, I think a big part of it is you can't really be watching a stream while you're playing. It's obvious, or watching YouTube. But another piece is you can't really be scrolling on Instagram or TikTok like between rounds. If you're really interested and you really want to improve, you got to be present. You wouldn't be in a competitive game of basketball and be scrolling on the sidelines or between plays. I think a big thing here, at least for me, this is super helpful, is you don't have to necessarily keep your phone uh, out of the room, but it should be away from you. Like if there's a couch nearby or a table nearby, just further enough away that, like, obviously sometimes we real life calls, you need to be able to hear a call, but not on your person. Like if it's in your pocket or it's on the table and it's notifications are popping up between rounds, like I would highly suggest it's like somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with that. You definitely don't want to be distracting yourself. And the pre-round isn't a time frame for you to be scrolling. It's not downtime. It's time for you to get ready for the next round.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at ultimates, looking at economy, looking at your teammates' ultimates, maybe reflecting on what you did last round, what did they do last round. Like you don't have that much time in the buy phase, so wasting that time, that crucial time to scroll on your phone.
And another part of process, and this is important, is this concept of being a student of the game. And so, Adam, in your mind, when we talk about being a student of the game, what do you mean?
I think it just means being curious. So like if you die, why did you die? If you won the round, what went well? If you lost the round, what did they do well? What did we maybe do poorly? What we could do better on? It's just like you're constantly looking for something to understand so that you can have a bigger, I guess, deeper understanding of the game. So you have more ideas to base your decisions around of. And the more you kind of become curious and I guess a student of the game, the more you can progress and not plateau. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times you might think that your play was the right one. But if you challenge that for just a second, be like, well, what if whatever my teammate is saying is correct? Or what if my play is actually the wrong one? Or what if there's multiple right plays? Like you have to explore these different avenues. So to me, that's what being a student of the game.
And I think that's such an important point because it extrapolates to the rest of our lives. I think today, in society today, it's really common for everyone to be know-it-alls. Like I know everything about this and I know what the answer is. And the reality is that for most complex things in the world, we don't know the exact answer. There's no different parallel universe where you could, even in the game of Valorant, which is a closed system, there's no way to exactly know if you would make a different decision, which would have been better. We don't have the capacity to run parallel universes. And so the only thing we can do then is to try to grow as individuals because we don't know everything yet. Like we don't know everything about the world, and we certainly don't know everything about this game. And even if we did know everything about this game, you as a player don't yet reflect that. And so I think, anyone who is good at their craft is fundamentally a student of the game. Like they're always learning, they're always wanting more things to add to their toolbox. And I think a big part of this is that humility both means that you can continue to grow as a player and as a person, but and this affects things, you're a better person to be around in the game. And so I as a person who is both in the game and wants to be a good person out of the game, being a student of it kind of is a very supportive stance because I think it helps people feel comfortable around you and supports you in having better relationships. So I think there's a lot of benefits to this more than just ranked improvement.
I agree with that.
Uh, in this new ranked episode, we have two new maps. Rest in peace, Ascent. We don't actually mean that at all. You deserve to have been gone a long time ago. So Ascent is rotating out, Sunset is rotating out, and Fracture is coming in. The much maligned and disliked map. It's a really different map, and Lotus is coming back. So these are for many people, they've never played Fracture before because it's been out of the rotation for a while. When these maps come in and it's brand new to people, what is your recommendation, Adam, for how people reacquaint themselves or even discover and understand these maps?
I mean, the micro scale is you want to get accustomed to the angles, maybe figuring out what angles are going to be common. I think one of the easiest things you can do is figure out what off barrier fights look like. So if you're hugging the barrier and you swing, and then the enemy player is hugging the barrier and they swing, what does that fight look like? And if you can kind of just figure that out for all parts of the map, you're looking pretty good. After that, I think understanding what the map like patterns are is a huge step. So on Lotus, you have rubble, like that A rubble fight, or maybe even the C mound fight sometimes, but you don't really contest front B. The same is true for Fracture. A lot of the time you'll be fighting A main to have A main control, but you might not really be fighting B main because you can't really control B main. So getting those patterns down is not obvious at first, but thankfully we have footage from both of these maps. So you could quickly just look through some older VODs. You can literally just look up on YouTube or something and see what the defenders are fighting for on defense, because typically in higher rank lobbies, they will be contesting something. Typically on Fracture, that's going to be A main. And typically on Lotus, that's going to be Rubble. But that doesn't mean that that's the only contestation that you do. It's just you want to kind of see what the patterns are. Once you kind of get an understanding of the patterns, then you kind of figure out how you slot into that pattern. So if you're a duelist player, you're probably going to be one of the players fighting at that area. If you're a sentinel player, that probably means you're setting up on the other side of the map. And then you can kind of figure that out. So I think those are the first two places to start: off barrier fights, and then figuring out the early patterns.
And is it helpful then in your mind to, if you, let's say, main KJ or a specific agent, for you to go and watch some high level VODs of a player playing that agent on that map?
100%. Yeah, just getting a little bit of like understanding of what your setup looks like, how they actually utilize their setup. Because honestly, a lot of times I'll see Sentinel players, they'll just throw their setup on there, but they have no understanding of like what happens when they come to your bomb site. It's kind of just free for all. Like everything they in their minds might be separated, but in a higher level player's mind, they know that they're going to use, let's just use Cypher for this example, they're going to activate this cage when they drop smokes, and then when the entry goes in, they're going to peek on this side, or they might be looking for the dart. Like there's a whole sequence to these things, and you need to be understanding what your sequence is going to be based on how they're hitting the bomb site. And your util is a whole, it's a setup, right? It's not individual pieces. It's a whole thing. So you have to figure out how to play with that setup.
And so, I think it's really easy when you're watching VODs to get into, again, that autopilot mode of just hoping they win or hoping you see them make a cool play. I think the student of the game piece is actually trying to think about, like, what are the play patterns that I'm consistently seeing from this high level player? Are they contesting this space? Are they not? What type of util are they throwing? And are they changing up that util? Is it like the Omen one way on A main on Ascent that they do it every round, or is it just some rounds? And from there, you can have these ideas and play patterns of high level players that are effective that can begin to inform how you are playing on the map.
And I think an important piece here too is you don't want to blindly copy. You want to try to make a understanding, or like try to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And if your conclusion is maybe not fully right, it still gives you something to work with. And then it gets like, let's say it gets challenged because you thought that the A main one-way smoke was really good against the rushes, but maybe it's better against contact plays, just as an example. Then you can kind of see how that plays out, right? But you do kind of want a reasoning. You don't want to just, blank, like autopilot through a VOD and be like, okay, write down the setup, tripwire here, cage here, and then just throw it down and not have any idea of what's going on. Like that tripwire is there so that when they're hitting the bomb site, you have a cue to activate your cage. And that cage is placed in this specific way so that line of sight is blocked on this side, which gives me a timing to peek on the other side because my back is now blocked. Like understanding those type of things. And it gets a little bit more complex than that, but yeah, just understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And if you don't fully understand it, just try to come up with the reasoning or see what makes sense to you. And then
the other thing, and this has come up in a lot of our map reviews, which, by the way, we know everyone wants Pearl, and we now know we have to do Fracture. So, because we've done Lotus, right? I think we've done Lotus.
I believe we've done Lotus.
So we need to do Fracture. But it's really helpful to understand how maps are like other maps that you already know and how they're not, right? In that Lotus, as an example, is kind of like Haven in that it's a 3-site map. Where it's not like Haven at all is that the attacker rotation between sites is really easy. And
which makes it a little bit more like Bind.
yes, and so in that way, it's quite attacker sided because the defense is already spread thin, and the attack side can move quickly between bomb sides. So that's something to just think about as you're learning these um, maps. Is to just think about which ones they remind you of other maps, because that will help you understand the play pattern. I want to move to the second last one, which is this is one of our first podcasts we did, Adam, which was on mental resets and mental toughness. So, what do you think we should mean by mental toughness?
Mental toughness to me is not giving up so quickly and actually like sticking it out for the long haul. Like when you queue up a game, you're agreeing to yourself and your teammates that you're playing out a full match. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes when I queue into a game and I'm already a little bit tilted, maybe something doesn't go my way, maybe my teammate doesn't listen to my comm, which might have been the comm that would have won the round, and I feel like I'm entitled to them listening to my call because it was a good call. You have to be able to reset and also not take it personally. And what that looks like in real game means you just focus on the next round, mm-hmm. right? So if you're playing round 3 or round 5 or round 8, it doesn't matter. You're just looking to play the next round.
Well, and I think it's important to chime in on that, which is we are playing Valorant, which is up to, and sometimes more, 24 rounds separated by a buying phase. And that's distinct from League of Legends, which you are 45 minutes in the same game. And if it's snowballing one way, it's snowballing one way. Where the rounds are, I mean, there is economy effects, but effectively every round is a reset. And so we need to be able to use those round resets as also like a mental reset. Like that's the advantage we have here. Like both the game resets and our mental can reset. And so that's where using tools like a psychological Sigh, which we've had Coach Scully on before. Actually, maybe Adam, what does that look like? Like how would you use a psychological Sigh during a buying phase as a reset?
So for those that aren't familiar, basically it's double inhale, exhale. You could just look it up on YouTube and Hiraman covers it. But the way that I use this practically is after big rounds. So let's say like I was in a really close clutch. I was in a 1v4 and I won it. Or I lost it. Either or, I'm resetting back to baseline. Anytime your emotions are spiked, you want to do this to come back to baseline. So let's say it's a really close game. It's 11-10. The pressure is coming up, right? If they win this round, it's going to be 11-11. That's a good time for you to do this reset. Mm-hmm. Other times that you might consider is when your teammates are kind of, going off the walls and they're over communicating or they're becoming toxic. Get that reset. Anytime you feel yourself like you're going too high, you come back to base. At least that's, I think, the most effective way to use it. Of course, it's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. You need a little bit of awareness in the moment. Okay, things are getting out of hand. Let me reset. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a really good tool. You have the time for it. And it doesn't mean that you have to like close your eyes and stop. Mm-hmm. Like you just have to focus on your breath. So
it takes like 3 or 4 seconds. Like it's a deep inhale. You stop, you inhale a little bit more, and then you exhale. And I think a big part of this is as you exhale, think about letting go of whatever it is that you're holding on to. And I think an important part of this too is just to recognize and realize that oftentimes our own like mental monologue is our own worst enemy. Like if you've missed or whiffed a shot, how often have you told yourself that you're garbage and you have terrible aim? And if you think about that, that is not supporting you. That is not serving you in winning that next round. So part of this is letting go of that, acknowledging it and letting go of it and just being able to move on. And I think that's really important. So make use of that because I think it's a huge level up and it's a huge level up relative to your opponents. Agent pool and role mastery.
This one's like up there as probably one of the most important things. So a framework that we've talked about with this game is low elo, you work on mechanics. In the mid elo, you work on your agent mastery, and then the high elo, you understand like macro a little bit more. the thing is like agent mastery and mechanics is the fundamental of this game. Like, bare bones mechanics comes first, right? Because it's a shooter. But you pick an agent and that's your role for the whole game. That's it kind of pockets you in a certain playstyle, but in order to understand how to play in that playstyle, you have to actually understand the role to a deep level. And then on top of that, once you understand that role at a deep level, you can now start limit testing. And what that kind of means to me is, I'll do it with an example. The sentinel role people think of as generically passive, right? You're watching flank, or on defense, you're holding down a bomb site. You're not really pushing for space. But the best sentinels do the opposite. They do take space. They are playing aggressively. They are lurking aggressively. They are getting info. So with Cypher, you might be doing an aggressive camera on round start. Or if the enemy players are spotted on one side of the map, you will be aggressively taking space and abandoning your setup. You don't really understand these nuances if you don't main one role. And to do the inverse, if you're playing a duelist, typically you're told to entry for the team. You go in first, whatever. But if that's not working, what's the alternative? Do you bait? Do you not go in first? Do you instead lurk? Do you maybe time your util a little bit better? Like, you really have to understand your role and your agent, so you can have some type of role mastery and agent mastery to, I guess, hit flow state and to actually perform. So yeah,
I think a part of this is you have to have like respect for the game. Whenever someone says like, "Oh, I can't believe you are plat," and you're playing in a plat lobby, the reality is, well, you're here with me, right? The games are selected to have roughly a 50% win rate, right? And so we need to have respect for the game, that it's not easy. And I think a big part of this is, we know that writing, if you're right-handed and you write right-handed, that feels comfortable. And we know how awkward it feels to write left-handed. I feel like playing an agent for which you don't have any mastery of is like playing the game left-handed. You're fundamentally, like, you might be a plat level player, or maybe a diamond or ascendant level player, but your ability to express that ability is related to your mechanics, which is the same across agents, but through your fluidity of your util and knowing the play patterns and knowing when to do all these things. And the moment you are starting to express that skill through something you don't know how to do well, you're playing the game left-handed, and therefore you might be an ascendant level player, but because you're playing a role or an agent that you aren't familiar with, you're essentially playing at, let's say, 2 tiers below that, right? Because you're stilted and uncomfortable and less than optimal, and you're not actually utilizing the proper play patterns.
And this is a huge argument to not be a fill player. So one mindset that I hear from fill players is, I can fill on this role better than my teammate will be able to fill. That may be true, but what you need to understand is, when you're maining a role, your goal isn't to, I guess, fill out the team. Your goal is to be better than the enemy at your role, right? And then how can you assert yourself in the game with your agent? And I think this kind of really comes out with fill players, because they're like, oh, my average of my roles is going to be better than the fill, but you won't ever reach the threshold of where you're taking over a game. So let's just say, on average, your fill on all the roles is level 52, and your teammates, when they fill, is level 40. But let's just say that you need to have a level of 60 to actually take control of a game. You will never hit that threshold. So even though level 52 is higher than 40, you're not high enough level to actually carry a game. And that happens constantly, which means you're stuck. And then you're relying on random teammate number 2, to be level 60, and then for also them to express that level in the game. And that's a tough one. So it's a mindset that follows everyone in every single game. I mean, Marvel Rivals is a game that's popping off right now, and I've kind of dabbled into it, and I've followed this exact mentality of, I need to one trick to get better. And I'm literally only playing one character, and I'm shooting up in the ranks. And of course I have shooter experience, but it really makes learning the game I guess that's another point. You learn the game so much quicker because you're learning the game in the lens of your character or your role, which then allows you to understand the other roles even better compared to if you're playing one role. Sorry, if you're playing all the roles instead of one role, you might have like a more basic understanding of all the roles, but you don't have that deep understanding of one role so that you can apply that deeper understanding to all the other stuff.
It's interesting. What it comes to mind for me is that you can be playing for your floor, and that would be fill. Like you're trying to actually minimize volatility across games, which is an objective. I don't think it's a good one as it relates to improvement. It's actually something that people do in investing, is like they will try to minimize volatility. And to do so, they minimize their returns. And so one thing here I think is like we're not playing to minimize volatility. You're going to win some games, you're going to lose games. We're playing to win. We're playing to move that needle upwards. And I think the best way to do that is to be really good at one role. And I think you would agree with this, Adam, is if you are a initiator main, just play your initiator. And if you don't have smokes that game, unless you're in like an immortal level lobby, it's fine. Like you'll figure it out.
That's very true. I mean, even just in my own recent climb back to Radiant, I was filling. I started by filling because I was scared, right? Like I wanted to get my mechanics up, so I was filling every single role under the sun, aside from Duelist. And then the next act comes around, and then I'm just only playing Raze or only playing Silva, and my Raze win rate was like over 75%, and like my KD was high. It was like you couldn't even compare my Raze to any other agent because I'm a Raze main. Like I have the most depth on that agent. Mm-hmm. And if I embraced that from the start, maybe it would have cut the time, like cut the climb in half, or whatever. But
well, it's because really through that agent, your skill expression is very close to your skill level, right? And when you're playing all of these other agents, you're playing with like the training belt on, like Rock Lee, like you're moving around slower because you're less capable. You don't know the play patterns.
It's very tough. It's a very tough trap that people get into, myself included.
Okay.
And maybe it stems from confidence. I don't know.
That is our 2025 ranked review. That kind of covers at a high level a lot of the topics we've covered in the past. And if you want to learn more about those, you can watch some of our old episodes that have covered them more in depth. So go back and do that. As always, we are so thankful for everyone here. We are so happy that you're watching. And again, if you would like to join the community, it is we'd be so happy to have you. It is ko-fi.com/thisvalorantlife. And until next week, have a great day.